There is a presence within you. It walks with you, not your shadow, but your essence. It speaks without sound, and it touches others without hands. This is your aura. Sometimes it comforts, other times it unsettles. Not because you are wrong, but because you are powerful in ways even you do not yet understand. Today, let me share with you 13 silent signs that your aura unknowingly intimidates. If you find yourself in these signs, do not dim your light. Do not soften your soul for comfort's sake. Remember, you do not scare people because you are dangerous. You scare them because you remind them of who they could become if they stopped running. So walk on, quietly powerful. Let your aura speak and let the world adjust. There is a silence that is hollow, the silence of absence, of disengagement, of disinterest. And then there is a different kind of silence, the kind that fills the space instead of emptying it. It is not quiet because there is nothing there. It is quiet because everything is there. This is your silence. Heavy not with tension, but with awareness. When you enter a room and speak nothing, the silence doesn't vanish. It deepens. Others may not consciously register this shift, but their bodies react. Some straighten their backs. Some lower their eyes. Some begin to talk more nervously, almost frantically, as though trying to outrun the stillness that your presence evokes. They are not uncomfortable because you are hostile. They are uncomfortable because you are whole, and wholeness can feel confronting to those who are still fractured. Most people have learned to use words as a shield, to deflect, to distract, to avoid. But your silence strips those shields away. It forces others to meet not just you, but themselves in the mirror your stillness holds up to them. And what they see in that mirror is not always what they're ready to face. Your presence, quiet and unshifting, invites them to see the parts of themselves they've managed to drown in noise. Without a single word, you challenge the unspoken contracts people carry. The agreements to keep conversations shallow, interactions convenient, emotions controlled. You do not threaten these contracts by intention, but your energy exists outside of them, and that alone is enough to unsettle. When people cannot predict your reactions or categorize your presence, they begin to project, and what they project is often their own discomfort with authenticity. In meetings, in crowds, even in casual interactions, your silence sometimes speaks the loudest. You observe, and others feel observed. You listen, and others feel heard in ways they did not prepare for. Your stillness has a way of making others hyper, aware of their own noise. You do not ask them to be quiet, yet your quietness makes their voices feel louder than they intended. You become a mirror, not of judgment, but of truth. They may not describe you as intimidating. That word feels too sharp, too pointed. But they will say you're intense or serious or difficult to read. What they mean is you don't play the same social games. You don't fill silences just to smooth tension. You let things be awkward, real, raw, and that kind of courage, the courage to be, without explaining, makes many people uneasy. You see, most are not used to someone who is not performing. Most are not used to someone who is simply present. When you are not trying to impress, convince, or entertain, you remove the script. And now others must improvise. And improvisation in front of someone whose presence is grounded and still can feel terrifying, not because you demand it, but because your silence does. In truth, the silence you carry is not absence, it is fullness. It is the kind of fullness that does not need to announce itself. Like the deep ocean, it does not crash to prove its power. It simply is. And people, even if they don't understand why, feel it in their bones. People rarely see you for who you truly are, not because you hide, but because they do not know how to look beyond the surface. Your energy doesn't shout, it hums, and that frequency, subtle, steady, and unwavering, is easy to misread in a world addicted to volume and noise. So they assign names to what they don't understand, cold, mysterious, distant, but they are naming their own discomfort, not your truth. You speak plainly, move calmly, and carry yourself with a kind of internal alignment that doesn't bend easily. To some, this feels like disinterest. They expect people to shift around them, to fill empty spaces with agreement or enthusiasm. But you do not bend unless there is reason. Your stillness is misread as arrogance, your clarity as detachment. They do not understand that depth often wears a quiet face. It is not that you are unclear, quite the opposite. Your words, when you choose to speak, are often precise. Your intentions are rooted, not scattered. But this very steadiness makes you hard to read for people who rely on emotional guesswork. They mistake subtlety for secrecy. You are not hiding, you are simply not broadcasting. There is a vast difference between being unreadable and being self-contained. There are moments when someone may ask you a question, and your pause before answering unsettles them. They are not used to people who think before they speak. They interpret the silence as hesitation or evasion or distance. But you are simply letting truth rise from still waters, not pulling it from panic or pretense. In this world, fast answers are often confused with honesty. You move slower, deeper. Those who expect surface-level conversation may find themselves unsure how to engage with you. Your presence invites more. It does not allow the usual rhythm of automatic replies and polite falseness. People begin to sense that they cannot simply perform around you, that your presence has a way of waiting for the real to show up. And when they cannot deliver it, they often feel exposed, and in that discomfort they decide you are the problem. You are not aloof, you are anchored. But for those who have never met someone who no longer seeks approval, your groundedness can feel like emotional distance. In truth, it's not that you are unavailable. It's that your energy doesn't reach outward to please. It simply is. You are not chasing connection, so others must walk toward you, not wait to be pulled. Many don't know how to do that. Sometimes even your warmth is misread. You offer presence instead of performance. You listen instead of interrupt. You hold space without trying to fix or change. This kind of attention, pure and unfiltered, feels intense for those used to conditional affection. They may say you are too much, but what they mean is, you are not pretending, and that kind of realness can be overwhelming for those who still wear masks. And so, you are often misnamed, misjudged, misunderstood, but not because you are unclear. It is because people look for reflections, and you offer depth. They want to recognize themselves in others, but you offer them something more rare, the opportunity to see beyond their own patterns. And that can feel like standing before a still lake, realizing the water is deeper than it seems, and they've never truly learned to swim. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a spoken meditation, animated script, or if there is something different in the way your eyes meet the world. You do not glance, you see, not just the form, the gestures, the movements, but the meaning beneath them. You observe in silence what others try to hide in plain sight. This makes people nervous, though they often cannot articulate why. Your gaze, while calm, carries a strange clarity, one that pierces through performance and meets people in places they thought were invisible. You look without judgment, but that only makes it more difficult for them, because judgment is easier to fight. It can be dismissed, argued with, explained away, but to be seen, truly seen, without accusation or praise, is unnerving. It's as if their image begins to dissolve and something more honest stands in its place. Most don't expect this from a stranger. They expect neutrality, they expect surface, but you, without intention, deliver depth. Avoiding your eyes becomes a form of self-defense. They may smile, nod, or speak with enthusiasm, but their gaze darts, hesitates, falls. It's not about disrespect. It's about protection. There is a quiet understanding, even in silence, that your presence does not allow masks to stay on for long. They don't fear you. They fear what parts of themselves might rise to the surface when seen by you. You do not chase eye contact. You don't need to. Your stillness is not a performance, and your attention is not a tactic. It simply is. When your eyes meet someone else's, there is no script in your mind, there is only presence. But for many, this is unfamiliar territory. They are used to eye contact as a tool for manipulation, for charm, for status. Yours, however, contains no agenda. It simply sees, and being seen is a vulnerable act. For those carrying unspoken shame, secrets, or unresolved pain, your gaze becomes a kind of silent mirror. And mirrors are not always welcome. Most people have built careful layers between themselves and the truth. They aren't ready for someone to look straight through those layers, especially someone they've just met, especially someone who isn't trying, especially someone who doesn't flinch when truth appears. Children and animals often react differently. They don't carry the same barriers. They meet your gaze without hesitation because they sense what many adults have forgotten. That real seeing is not dangerous unless one is hiding. Their instincts tell them your eyes are not a threat. They are a window. But most grown minds have long abandoned that simplicity. They interpret stillness as challenge and clarity as confrontation, and yet you don't feel like you're doing anything special. You're simply being, you're simply looking, but your looking holds more than sight. It holds presence, stillness, curiosity, and truth all at once. And in a world that rushes, distracts, and conceals, that kind of gaze can feel like too much light all at once. People who live in dimness do not adjust easily to sunlight, so they look away, they change the subject. They laugh nervously or find their phone. They sense something ancient and alive in your eyes, and it reminds them of something they lost or buried long ago. You don't even have to speak for this to happen. Sometimes all it takes is one glance from you and something shifts in the air. Not out of force, but out of quiet recognition. There are people who enter a room like an event. Their voice, their gestures, their timing, all calibrated to capture notice. But you are not one of them. You do not arrive to be seen. You arrive simply to be, and yet, paradoxically, it is this very absence of effort that causes heads to turn. Not in obvious ways, but in subtle shifts, the way conversations lose rhythm, the way eyes linger without knowing why. Your presence does not demand space, it creates it. You do not take attention with noise, you receive it through gravity. There is a density to your being, not heavy, but grounded, like a mountain, like a still lake. And people, even if they don't consciously realize it, begin to orient themselves around that stillness. They speak differently, they stand differently. It is as if your very stillness disturbs the choreography of superficial interaction. You could be sitting at the edge of the room, barely moving, saying nothing, and still people will glance toward you. Not out of suspicion, but out of some unspoken curiosity. They sense that something is present which does not align with the surface-level rhythm of the moment. It is not what you do, it is what you carry, an unseen presence, a kind of quiet intensity that rearranges the subtle atmosphere around you. Some may feel drawn to you without knowing what draws them. Others may feel oddly cautious, unsure of why your silence makes them alert. It is not that you radiate threat, it's that your energy asks for something deeper, even without words. When someone is used to being admired for their noise, your quietness unsettles them. You become a question that cannot be answered with charm. There are times when you've wondered why people seem to watch you, even when you're not trying to be seen. Why some are polite but distant, why others become unusually friendly, as if trying to win your favor before you've even asked anything of them. It's not personal in the way you might think, it's energetic. Your aura stretches out farther than your body. Long before your mouth speaks, your presence has already arrived. You do not rush into places trying to make an impression, but your very calmness leaves one. It's the difference between firelight and sunlight. Firelight flickers and pulls attention with motion. Sunlight, however, simply fills the space steady and unannounced. You are the latter, and in that steadiness others are made aware of their own turbulence. It is not you that disrupts them. It is their own restlessness rising to the surface when faced with your calm. Sometimes, even without eye contact or speech, your presence can feel like a quiet confrontation. People begin to reflect. Not because you've asked them to, but because your energy refuses to feed their illusions. It does not match their noise. It doesn't validate their masks. It doesn't play into the game, so it draws attention not by performance, but by contrast. You become the still point in a spinning room, and what's most puzzling for those around you is that you never seem to need the attention you draw. You do not chase it, you do not use it, you don't bask in it or retreat from it. You remain still, as if unaffected by the orbit of eyes and minds around you. And that perhaps is what truly pulls people in, not because you want anything from them, but because you don't. You do not mean to ask the questions that make people pause. They come naturally to you not as challenges, but as invitations. Where others might start with, "What do you do?" you find yourself asking, "What makes you feel alive?" Or, "What do you fear losing the most?" These questions are not heavy to you. They are honest, but for others, they feel like a sudden wind in a still room, unexpected and disorienting. Most people live behind conversational fences. Polite dialogue, safe subjects, surface talk. It's how they navigate the world, a kind of emotional diplomacy. But you arrive and skip the ritual. You move past the weather and into the climate of the soul. You don't ask people to undress their stories, yet your presence somehow does. They feel it that your curiosity is not social, but spiritual. It's not about facts. It's about essence. You're not asking to provoke. You're asking because you genuinely want to know. You want to see what lies beneath the practiced smiles and memorized answers. You want to know who they are when the noise fades, when the masks fall. But many people don't know how to meet that. They've rehearsed answers to the common questions, but yours do not live in the common. Yours live where the light doesn't reach unless someone dares to open the door. There's a sacred discomfort that happens when someone feels truly asked, not surveyed, not sized up, but asked, and your questions do that. They ask from the heart and they land in the chest, not the ears. Some people lean in when you speak, not out of interest, but because they feel seen in a way they didn't expect. Others lean away not out of offense, but out of fear. Not everyone is ready to meet themselves in conversation. You can sense when people start reaching for their script, the safe lines, the predictable topics, the laughter that fills space instead of meaning. And you often wonder whether to follow them there, to make them feel safe. But something inside you resists. Not out of pride, but because you've tasted real connection, and you know how thin the surface can be. You'd rather sit in silence than skim across another soul. Your questions are not many, but they are deep. You do not fire them quickly. You wait, you listen. You offer space for others to fill with truth if they choose. And sometimes they do. Sometimes people tell you things they've never said aloud, even though they met you only minutes ago. It's not because you force them. It's because something in you holds space wide enough for honesty to emerge. And when they speak, really speak, you do not flinch, you do not shrink, you do not rush to fix or compare. You just stay present, you let them unfold, you let them be raw, unresolved, tangled. Most people aren't used to that. They expect interruption, solution, or judgment, but your questions don't seek to change, they seek to meet. And in that meeting, something begins to open. You do not fear depth, you live there. So you invite others into it, not by dragging them down, but by standing still and letting them realize there is more. And even if they do not follow, even if they shift the conversation back to lighter things, the echo of your question remains. It lingers like a thread in the mind, pulling at something forgotten, something real. You do not carry a measuring stick. You do not compare. You do not ask people to explain their value or list their achievements. And yet, strangely, many feel the urge to do so when they are around you. They speak of titles, of accomplishments, of plans. They drop names. They highlight moments of approval they've received from others. All without you asking a single thing. It is not arrogance, it is anxiety. A subtle, invisible pressure to justify themselves in your presence. This reaction often leaves you puzzled. You've never considered yourself a judge. You are not concerned with hierarchy or status, or where someone stands in the invisible ladders society builds. You are simply present, but it is precisely this unshakable presence, grounded and uninterested in appearances, that makes others reflect on their own instability. You do not play the same game, and in not playing, you quietly reveal that the game exists. You hold yourself in a way that suggests you've already found something inside that others are still chasing outside. Not because you claim to have answers, but because you don't need to. Your contentment is not loud, it's subtle. It's the kind that comes from being at home in yourself, and for those who are still looking for that home through the eyes and praise of others, your presence becomes a kind of mirror. Not one they expected, not one they were prepared for, so they begin to perform, even unconsciously, not out of manipulation, but out of longing. They want to be seen by you, felt by you, acknowledged by you. But they aren't sure how to earn that in a space where status doesn't seem to matter, so they fall back on the tools they know, titles, stories of success, cleverness, humor. They try to prove something, but can't name exactly what, because it's not you they are trying to convince. It's themselves. They sense that your eyes are not distracted by shine, that your attention does not rise and fall with the curve of someone's resume or popularity. You listen from a different place, not from the ears of admiration, but from the heart of recognition. And this disorients those who are used to being seen for what they do, rather than who they are. In your presence they feel the space widened, and in that widening, their own unclaimed depth becomes visible. You are not asking them to be more, you are inviting them to be real, and realness, for many, feels like exposure, not because you demand it, but because your energy does not reward the mask. You do not validate illusions. You do not applaud performance. You offer something more difficult, quiet, non-judge, mental awareness. And in that awareness, others feel their layers begin to peel back, unbidden, unforced. They may walk away from your presence feeling unsettled, yet strangely drawn to return. Because while you never criticized, never corrected, never competed, they somehow saw more of themselves while standing beside you than they have in years. You became a moment of internal confrontation disguised as a conversation. They felt what they have not yet claimed, and it left an impression, one they cannot quite explain. So you continue to move through the world not by demanding attention, but by illuminating truth. And those who meet you, even briefly, are left wondering why they felt the need to prove anything at all. And in the quiet after the moment, they begin to ask deeper questions, not about you, but about themselves. You are not playing the game, the one most don't realize they're in. The subtle chase for approval, the constant scanning of eyes for affirmation, the careful shaping of words to please. You've stepped outside of it, not out of rebellion, but because you simply no longer need it. Approval is not your currency. And in a world addicted to applause, this makes you unreadable and deeply unsettling. Most people have spent years crafting a version of themselves that will be accepted. They learn the lines, study the smiles, mimic the moods that earn nods of belonging, and then they meet you, someone who moves without the tug of invisible strings, someone who isn't angling for validation or watching for cues. It confuses them, disorients them, because if you are not performing, then who are you? You carry a piece that wasn't purchased through performance. It's the kind that arrives slowly, earned in solitude, in truth, in loss, in silence. And this piece, calm, grounded, steady, is threatening to those who only know how to exist by reflection. They need to be seen to feel real, but you, somehow, are real without being seen. That alone shakes something loose in them. They may not admit it, they may even smile at you, but underneath there's a quiet discomfort, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence reflects back the cost of their pretending. You've stopped chasing something they still run toward, and your stillness reveals their sprint. They feel exposed even if you say nothing, even if you simply sit there. When someone is used to living in reaction, reacting to praise, to criticism, to trends, To judgment, your neutrality feels like defiance. They can't place you. You don't bend to flattery. You don't shrink at disapproval. You respond instead of react. And that makes you unpredictable, and in their world, unpredictable means unsafe. Not because you are harmful, but because you are free. Your energy says, I don't need you to like me in order to be myself. And that sentence, even unspoken, is like thunder to someone who relies on approval to breathe. It shakes the walls they've built around their identity. It whispers that another way is possible, one where authenticity is not negotiable, where peace does not depend on applause, where presence is not performance. You don't need to declare this. You don't need to teach it. You simply embody it, and in doing so, you become a mirror that shows people their own internal hunger. Not to shame them, but to wake them. Some will walk away. Some will retreat into their masks, but others will begin to wonder what it would feel like to stop chasing, too. To rest, to return to themselves, and still you keep walking. You do not linger in roles you've outgrown. You do not water yourself down to fit the mold of comfort. You do not interrupt your inner calm to join the noise. And this unwavering refusal to chase what does not nourish you becomes your quiet revolution, one that doesn't need a stage, a spotlight, or a crowd to matter. You are not one to fill silence for the sake of comfort. You've never found peace in noise. While others may speak to maintain rhythm, to assert presence, to be seen, you wait. You listen, you observe the layers behind what is said, the pauses, the eyes, the subtext. So when you finally speak, it is not a reaction. It is a response, distilled, clear, and shaped by stillness. And that difference, though subtle, creates an impact that lingers. Your words do not seek attention, yet they receive it, not because of volume, but because of depth. There's a weight in what you say, not a heaviness that burdens, but a substance that cannot be dismissed. You may speak only a few lines in an entire conversation, but they often become the ones people carry with them. A sentence, a phrase, a single observation, and days later, they are still turning it over in their mind. This isn't something you force. You're not crafting your speech to be memorable. You're not calculating effect. In fact, many times you forget what you've said, but others don't. Because when you speak, it is from a place that most people rarely visit. A place beneath pretense, beneath performance, beneath noise. Your words rise from that quiet place, and they carry the vibration of it. People feel this, even if they can't explain it. They may respond to your words with silence, with widened eyes, or with a sudden shift in posture. It is not that you've said something complex. Often it's the opposite. You speak simply, but the truth behind your words rings like a bell through fog. It cuts through the blur of over-talked lives and reaches something ancient in them, the part that still remembers stillness. Because you don't speak to win, you don't speak to prove, you speak to name what is real, and in a world trained to dodge what is real, this act, even quiet and brief, can feel revolutionary. You don't tell people what to think. You don't force ideas into their hands. You drop something small and true at their feet and walk on. Whether they pick it up or not is not your concern. You've learned that truth never needs to be chased. In group settings, people may underestimate you at first. You are quiet, perhaps even withdrawn. They may mistake this for insecurity, disinterest, or detachment. But then you speak once, and the atmosphere shifts. not because you raised your voice, but because you raised the level of the conversation. You brought it from opinion to essence, from assumption to awareness, and suddenly people listen more closely. Your restraint becomes part of your resonance. Because you do not speak often, people learn that when you do, there is something to hear. Not always agreement, not always comfort, but always something honest. And in a world saturated with noise, this honesty cuts through like a thin, clear blade. You don't fight to be heard. You wait for the right moment and let silence do most of the talking. And so your words become markers in people's minds, not the kind that shout or glow, but the kind that settle quietly in the soul. They may not realize at first the impact of what you've said, but later, in a quiet moment, in a decision, in a dream, your words return. Not as instruction, but as clarity, a small, rooted truth in a noisy world of echoes. And so, perhaps the truth is this: it was never about being feared, it was about being felt. In a world where so much is forgotten before it's finished, you remain remembered. Not for what you did, but for what you didn't need to do. Your silence, your steadiness, your unwillingness to dilute yourself, these are not weapons, they are mirrors. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection, so walk gently, speak rarely, but when you do, know that your presence teaches more than words ever could. You are not intimidating, you are simply unafraid to be real, and in a world built on masks, that is enough to stir the ground beneath people's feet. Let them feel it, let them shift, and you keep standing still. And so, perhaps the truth is this: it was never about being feared, it was about being felt. In a world where so much is forgotten before it's finished, you remain remembered, not for what you did, but for what you didn't need to do. Your silence, your steadiness, your unwillingness to dilute yourself, these are not weapons, they are mirrors. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection, so walk gently, speak rarely, but when you do, know that your presence teaches more than words ever could. You are not intimidating, you are simply unafraid to be real, and in a world built on masks, that is enough to stir the ground beneath people's feet. Let them feel it, let them shift, and you keep standing still.